In today's video, we're going to be talking about investing in the community team of the season before they go out of packs. So just before the video does start, a quick little ad on a trading service I offer over on Twitch. For the cheapest premium trading service for just £4, €4, or free with Amazon Prime. You'll get yourself daily trading and investing guides covering both Xbox and PlayStation with an array of different techniques depending on your budget. I've been trading for over 10 years, making over 100 million on multiple titles, and recently making over 10 million in the first month for the last 3 years. So in today's video, what we're going to be talking about is the investments that worked last year, what didn't work last year, why those did and didn't work last year, and then looking at what is released with next week's Prem Team of the season, how that affects the investments we make this week, and finally I will be ending off with the investments that I do recommend picking up. So first off, what we're going to do is show you the trend that occurred last year, because that's basically the trend we're going to cop on. So this was the most consistent team of season last year, and a fair few of these players did really well out of packs. In fact, the players that did really well out of packs were the Premier League players. So let's go and show you guys some of those rises. We start off here with Mitchell, who went down to 40k, and within 1 week he went from 40k to 100k. Insane rise. Second one was Livramento, who was 40k within a week up to 62k. We then have Conor Coady, who was 29k within a week, 57k. We then have Eric Laporte, who didn't do as well, but he still did pretty well, 466, who went up 140k. We then have Fred, who was 450k, and he went up there to 550k. And finally we have Zaha, who went from 355k all the way up here to 450k. Now there are a few Premier League team of the season players that didn't work as well. That is McGinniester, who was 45k, who really just held it under 45k when out of packs. And then secondly, Hugo Lloris, who went from 150k all the way down here to 95. And while we're here covering the players that didn't work, here are the non-Prem players. And here's actually the most popular non-Prem players. And it basically just shows you that if you're not in the Prem, you do traditionally go down. We got the likes of Carrasco, who before going out of packs was 78k. Then after going out of packs, he went down to 66k. Then have Serge Gnabry, who went from 72k and then dropped there to 67k. And finally, we got ourselves Cacret, who went from 74k and he went all the way down there to 50k before rebounding. So we can see that basically the only players that rose were Premier League players. But now let me explain to you guys why some Premier League players worked and some players didn't work. So the players that worked the best were Mitchell. Mitchell is a Premier League left back. And if we go and look at the likes of the Premier League team of the season, we can have a little look at this and go, okay, well, you know, let's say people are opening packs. What left backs can they pack? Well, the only left back they could pack was the likes of team of the season Cancelo. Now, if they were packing team of the season Cancelo was 930k, meaning one, he was not easy to pack, and two, if you wanted to buy him, he was very expensive. Therefore, what people did is they went, you know what, bin off buying Cancelo for 900k, let me just go and pick a Mitchell up for 50k, 60k. And eventually what happened is so many people went, yeah, bin off the idea of packing Cancelo or bin off the idea of buying Cancelo, let me go and buy this team of season. That allowed this card to 2.5 times the price in a week. It was insane. Again, 40 to 100k is an insane rise. And again, we can go to the next player this worked well with, which was Livramento. And again, this didn't work as well, but you can tell why. So we went from 40k and we went up here to 62k. So now let's have a look at the Premier League right backs that came out. Well, the Premier League right back was Trent, and Trent was nowhere near the price of Cancelo. Cancelo was 900k, whereas Trent was only 150. Again, still a big enough difference between the price of Trent and the next cheapest, which was Livramento. But Livramento didn't go from 40k to 100k. Livramento just went 40k to 62k because Trent wasn't that expensive. So, you know, if people wanted to use Trent instead, they weren't forking out 900k, they were only forking out 150. We can then look at the likes of Conor Coady, again coming in here at 30k. And if we look at the centre-backs, obviously in teams you do need more than one centre-back. We had Van Dijk, who was 900k, and we had Diaz. Now Diaz was cheap, but like I say, you know, you need two Premier League centre-backs. And he was coming in here at 220. So again, not the most expensive card in the world, but it was still expensive enough for Conor Coady to go from 30k to almost 60k, almost doubling in a week. Because if you guys don't know, when the Premier League team of the season is out, everyone is building Prem packs. Everyone is building Prem teams because they're opening all the Prem guaranteed packs, which then leads everyone to have Prem teams, Prem SBCs, Prem objectives. And everyone in the end of the week just has Prem teams. But as I say, there were a few Prem players that didn't work too well. We had Laporte, and again, Laporte did okay because, again, you had Van Dijk, who was maybe a little bit more demanded on the expensive, and you had Diaz, who was cheap. But at the same time, you did only have 2 centre-backs. We have Fred again. Fred did okay, but if we go and look at the Prem team this season, the reason Fred wouldn't have done as well is because Bernardo Silva wasn't overly expensive. Rodri, quite easy to pack. Rice was quite easy to pack. We had a Dele Alli SBC. So the SBC players also do have an impact if players do well or not. Obviously a cheap, well-demanded centre-back SBC could have meant that Conor Coady wouldn't have done as well. But obviously, you make your own luck, really. If you don't invest in loads of different players, then you're not making your own luck for, well, at least some of them are going to do well. So the players that didn't do very well was McGinn. And one of the reasons McGinn didn't do well is, again, if we go back to that Prem team, the season team, there was literally 1, 2, 3 cheap centre mids with another Prem SBC. So there was loads and loads and loads of players that were equally or easily beating him for ability. Not easily, but beating him for as good or as much demand, and he really wasn't anything too special. And then we go look at Hugo Lloris, who went from, again, 160 to the likes of 95k. And the reason that happened is just people preferred Alisson, and I'm pretty sure Alisson was a lot cheaper. I think there might have been loads of packs opened. Alisson was coming in at 71k, so why would you go and pay double that for Lloris? Unless, it was offering special links, but at the end of the day, everyone was building Premier League teams. So the players who didn't work were players that, in the Premier League team of the season, we had players as cheap as them. The players that worked really well were players, again, where, if we go back to the likes of Mitchell, they're players who the other player you could use is just extremely expensive. Or if we look at Conor Coady, just a lack of options in a certain position. So now what I'm going to go and do is I'm now going to go and have a look at the Premier League team of the season prediction. And basically we're going to go and spot gaps in positions where there's a lack of cheap players or just a lack of options. So the prediction that I'm going to be using and we're going to be taking as gospel is going to be scouting for FIFA. He's an extremely experienced person in this field, and therefore I do take his word as highly valued. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the players he said, and I'm basically just going to say who's going to be nice and cheap, who's going to be expensive, and therefore the positions we're going to look for. So starting off with Nick Pope, and Alisson shows us last year that in reality the goalkeepers are really cheap. So we do have De Gea in the current team, but unless you really wanted to push for those Man United links, a lot of the Man United players, Rashford and Shaw, are going to get that English chemistry from Pope as well as they would have from De Gea. We'll then get to Gabriel. He should be a relatively cheap centre-back, I'll be honest with you. I don't think any of his other cards are overly demanded, so again, not amazing for the centre-backs. Saliba should be a very expensive player. If he gets a card, it'd be like the Van Dijk. So in reality, maybe you can compare Gabriel to the Diaz, whereas Saliba is going to be more like Van Dijk. We'll then get Kieran Trippier, should be a relatively cheap right back, wouldn't be the fastest card in the world. Saka, right mid, should be very expensive. De Bruyne should be very expensive. Odegaard should be very expensive. Rashford should be very expensive. Salah, expensive. Kane should be not too expensive, but the thing with Kane is he's a relatively slow striker, therefore some of the faster strikers can actually be a bit more demanded than him, even if they lack in other positions. Haaland, going off his team of the year, we know he's going to be expensive. Botman would be cheap. Shaw would be relatively cheap, but his card wouldn't be too amazing, which I think is an interesting look. Rodri would be cheap. Casemiro, more likely than not, would be cheap. Martinelli would be like middle of the ground, again, not the cheapest, not the most expensive. Almiron would be about, again, mediocre, but not the best card in the world, and I think Watkins is really leaked to be like an SBC. So, looking at those positions, I'd say where we're lacking is left backs, because we've only got Luke Shaw. Right backs, because we've only got Trippier. Now, they'll both be relatively cheap, but the positions we're lacking in. Centre backs, slightly. It just depends if we get Gabriel and Botman. A lot of predictions only have 2 centre backs, but that's that. We then are lacking in cheap cams. We've got CDMs and centre mids just like last year in plenty. Left and right mids, again, I don't think we have a amazing right mids other than Saka, and Saka's expected to be expensive because Almiron, I don't think would be the best card in the world. So what we're going to go and do right now is we're now going to go look at the current most consistent team of the season, looking at this prediction and saying, okay, where are there holes to make investments? So now back to the community team of the season, and there are a few Prem players this year. Obviously we've got Gabriel Jesus coming in at striker, we've got Rice coming in at centre mid, Ake coming in at centre back, De Gea coming in at goal, and Bernardo Silva coming in centre mid with Robertson as a left back. So first one, Gabriel Jesus. Now I'd be quite surprised if Gabriel Jesus doesn't hold his value. There are a few threats to his price. Those threats to his price are Rashford, because that will be another 5-star skiller who could be a striker in the Prem. You've then got, obviously, Haaland and Kane. I don't think Haaland and Kane are going to be too much to worry about. Maybe Haaland because he's a top-end card, but Kane is rubbish compared to that card. So it'd be Haaland and Rashford. There's a chance he does go down in price because of the whole like new toys aspect, as in like people want to try the new cards. But I do think he should relatively hold his value. We then move down to Rice. I can't actually see Rice doing very well. I think it'll be just like McGinn last year, where there's too many options. You can go and use Rodri, you could go and use Casemiro. More likely than not, there'll probably be some centre mids from the Premier League, so I can't really see that card doing too well. Okay, I can see doing well. The only worry is if they give 3 centre backs. If they go and give Saliba should be like 1 million, maybe to 2 million coins. So it should be way too expensive to really move that Ake. It's just the second centre back of Botman, Gabriel, maybe Lisandro Martinez, you know, potentially being closer to the price of Ake. But he is someone I would recommend. I would recommend picking up the likes of Ake. I think at the moment he's looking good at about 230 on console or 220 on PC. I don't think he will start going up as of the 6 PM guaranteed most consistent, so I don't think you do have too long to hold on to him. And again, you would be holding on to him till the next Thursday, because then he'd go down in price when Prem Team season's over and people are building teams for the new league. De Gea, you know, unless De Gea goes down to SBC fodder, I don't think he's a good buy. I think Nick Pope again is going to have better links. If De Gea does go down to SBC fodder price, which would be 33k, yeah, I'd say it'd be an okay gamble. As I say, there are a few Man United players. Obviously, we know Man United players can do quite well out of packs previously, but again, like Pope is probably going to have a better card than him. So unless he's fodder, I think it's a bit risky. Bernardo Silva, I think, is a very interesting card because I think 1.1 million coins for a centre mid when we're going to have De Bruyne next week. We're going to have Odegaard. I'm not too sure if he'll hold too well. Obviously, he's got really nice dribbling, but does he have 5-star skills? They didn't bless him with 5-star skills, so the card's not really that unique. I could see it potentially going down in price, in all fairness, so I wouldn't recommend him. And then we get to Robertson. Robertson is my second investment that I recommend. I do think he's going to end up having a better card than Shaw. I don't think his links are as good as Shaw, but yeah, I do think he'll end up having a better card than Shaw, and I do think as a result he can rise next week with people building Premier League team of the season. But the investments this year, in reality, are nowhere on last year's. Last year we've got loads of 40, 50k players that we could just say, you know what, the Prem team of the season is going to be so much more expensive, so they'll do well. This year, really, you know, we're looking at 200-300k cards. So the reality is the play is nowhere near as good this year as it is last year. But I still would recommend, you know, want to put 20-30% of your coins on Robertson and Ake, and if De Gea goes to discard, De Gea in at discard. That is going to wrap it up for today. Now, tomorrow I've got a very interesting video, which kind of leads on from today's video, and that is, we saw how that Livramento and that Mitchell went up loads last year. Well, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be releasing a video tomorrow talking about how to identify other special cards that should do very well. Because it wasn't just old team of the seasons that rose, it was informed Cancelos, Timmy nominee Robertsons. These cards all rose in price on the Friday because of the exact same reason these team of the seasons did well. So this video, or that video, will be out tomorrow. If you want to wait for that video to do a bit of investing, there is an investing opportunity. But I'm going to be basically showing you guys how to spot where there's a lack of players, and as a result, what players to buy on the Friday when we know who's going to be in the team of the season, and what positions are lacking in good players. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow with a brand new video.